Okay, everybody, this is going to be beginner CAD exercises part two. And I'm going to go ahead and demo this in Fusion. And I'll probably do it a couple of times because there are a couple points I want to go ahead and get across here. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. So we're going to draw this image, this box with a square hole in it, and we'll just go ahead and get started. There goes what we start with. Okay, so I've already kind of went through some of the beginning parts with the first example, so hopefully I don't have to go through that as much here. But I'm going to start just by creating my basic sketch. Remember, it doesn't matter what plane I start on. I'll select that one. Then I'm going to start with a 2-point rectangle. I'll use this corner here as my origin point. I'm going to go ahead and type in the numbers directly, and then I'm going to press Tab to go from it. It just we have a couple different ways to go about it. Press Enter to finish that off. Then I finish my sketch. All right, then I'm going to go up to the Create menu, do an Extrude. Again, there's different controls that we can use. You can use the hand controls. You can use the numbers here. I'll use the direct number. I'll say 30. I'll build that up. Okay, so now again, we can notice that we have the sketch and the feature down here in the bottom window. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select that top face, and I'm going to create a sketch off of that face. And then again, I'm going to use the 2-point rectangle tool. You can kind of snap here, and we could just do this and go on its own, but I want to go ahead and get you guys used to fully defining your sketches. Remember that I'm still in my tool here, so I'm going to hit Escape. And then I'm going to go ahead and put in a sketch dimension. And I'll do those here. I'll say that's going to be 10. And then I'll put this down here. And this is going to be 10. And then this is going to be able to fully move around. But what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to also fully define it. So I'll go back to my dimension tool. Also notice that when you click down here, the hotkey is D, and then I'll grab it from one of these edges. Oh, and again, this is why you have to remember what you have selected, because since I had this point here, now in this situation, that's okay, but it's always a good idea, or often a good idea, excuse me, to make sure you clear your selections when you're doing this stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of this, hit escape again to clear what I'm touching with. So now there's no longer any points highlighted. Then I'll go to the sketch dimension tool and I'll click this line, and I'll do that as 10. And then I'm going to click this line here and this line again, and then I'll do that as 10. All right, and then I'll finish my sketch. Now I'll go back to this, I'll select this face, and then I will do the extrude tool. And again, we can kind of do the same thing where I can kind of pull it down. You'll see that it kind of snaps. I'll do 30, and I'll hit OK, and then boom, there we go. All right, now we can do this a couple different ways. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create my sketch again in a new file, create sketch. And then I'm going to go ahead, and what I'm going to do this time is we talk about design intent and um, how we'll align objects as far as the sketches and features that we use. So this time I did sketch, feature, and this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to put everything in one feature. So then I'll go ahead and do my base 30 here. And also what I'll go ahead and do is I'll go ahead and use constraints. Now remember that constraints can work a couple different ways. So what I'll do here is I'll select these two edges, and then I'll go up here and I'll select the equal length constraint. And then that'll go ahead and lock them. I'll press escape to get out of my tool, and then I'll do my 2-point rectangle again, and then I will draw to here, and then I'll click. And then what I can also do is last time I select the items first, this time I'll click the constraint first, and then I'll click this edge and then this edge, and then that'll put a equal length constraint. I'll press escape to remove from the tool, and then that'll kind of stay locked in. And then I'll go ahead and I'll add my dimensions like this. Oh, and then again, I still have something selected. So there we go. I'll say 10, and then that locks that in, and then I'll go ahead and put my dimension here. Then I'll say 10, then I'll say 10. All right, and then I'll go from there. Finish sketch, and then I'll go ahead and I'll make an extrusion from here. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and I'll use this as 30. Okay, so with that, we've already kind of talked about design intent with these. So with these steps here, we have sketch, feature, going from this. Also notice how your icons up here will change. It's basically like these features that have yet to be shown are what we call suppressed. They still exist, but when we move back this line here, it's almost like they don't exist up until a certain point. Remember how I spoke about how a parametric model is basically a list of commands. And one of the things is that when we talk about the best way to do this, whether or not it's better to put all of the sketches in, all of the details in one sketch and reduce the number of features, it really depends. And it really comes back to kind of evaluating your design intent. Okay, but again, there's even more that we can do to kind of better familiarize our design intent, because what the issue is that if we have to change this, I want to keep this center. So if I go back into either one of these, and then if I go on my first one here, excuse me, there we go. If I go back to my initial sketch here, and if I want to edit this sketch, and let's say I want this now to be 50, right? And I want to keep this in the middle, I then have to go back to this sketch and then change my dimensions as well. So I think this would turn out to be 20, right? So the thing is here is that when I talk about my design intent here is that I want this hole in the middle of this cube. Okay, so there's a couple ways I can do that. So one way I can do that is by the use of construction lines. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new one. I'll say create sketch. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start with my same 30 by 30 here. And then what I'll do is I'll leave that, finish my sketch. I'll then do my extrusion again, make it 30 millimeters again. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to again create my sketch on this face. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line. And then I can lock these from this corner to this corner. And then what I'll do is I'll make it a construction line. So I'll go here and I'll say line type, and this will make it a dash line, and this keeps it away from features. Okay. And then what I'll also do is I'll go down here and I'll use a point to reference this. So you'll see that I get the X, which shows a intersection constraint, and then when I pull it towards the middle, it'll give me that triangle, which is going to show a midpoint constraint. So then I'll take that, and then I'll go ahead and draw another rectangle, and then I'll draw this outside of it for right now, and then I'll do a equal length constraint on these edges to save myself a little bit of time. I'll do my dimension here to make it 10, and then I'll go here and then I'll make a line corner to corner here. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and make that construction. Now you can also make construction lines over here, and then I believe the X shortcut key will switch between construction or not. And then what I'll do is I will select this line and this point, and then I will add a midpoint constraint. Also, your constraints here will change as well, but you can always access them in the drop down menu. I'll make that midpoint, and then boom, that locks in the center. Okay, so then I'll go back to, I'll change my colors there. There we go. All right, so then I'll go back to this view here, and then I'll select this face, and then I will do an extrusion again, and I'll just pull that down to 30. There we go. And then there goes our one in there. Now, again, to represent our design intent, construction lines are always nice, but one of the things I always like to remind people of is that remember we always have our origin geometry as well. So, and this will be very helpful when we make multi-body parts or assembly. I'm a big proponent of using the default geometry to help show your design intent. So I'm going to copy what I did for the first one, where I'll put, or excuse me, the second one, where I put both sketches in the same space. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw my regular lines here, and then I will make the midpoint constraint with the center here. And then I'll go ahead and start using my constraints as well here. I'll do this and this, and then I'll press the equal length here, and then I'll dimension that to be 30. And then I will go for this here. And then I will equal length constraint these. And then I'll make that be 10. All right, and then I'll draw the line here. Now, one of the things you'll notice that I'm doing here is that I'm not making them construction lines, and this is because I want to highlight a feature that Autodesk Fusion does. So I'll make these constraints here. Now, a lot of different CAD tools have their own flavor of how they like to do stuff, and this is just one thing that Fusion does. Let me get back home to here. So since these aren't construction lines, one of the things that you can do is that when I go and do these extrudes, it lets me pick the specific spaces to kind of go from here. So it treats these as individual stuff. Some CAD tools don't like this because you basically have self-intersecting contours and they don't like this. So that's basically, so what I could do is I click one of these out and I can kind of pull it by itself. And so whether or not you want this is going to be depending on what you're working with. I don't like to work this way, but again, what I've said many times is whatever gets you to your satisfactory 3D model is what works. But I'm just doing this to go ahead and show the point of construction lines. So I'll cancel this out, and then I'll go back to that sketch. I'll edit this sketch again, and then I'll just make both of these construction lines, and I'll use the X hotkey to do that. Notice how this button over here is going to change when you make construction lines. So now when I edit that, and then I go back to doing my extrude here, I'll pull this up, and then I'll make that 30 again, and then we'll go from here. Okay, so then we have that set. And so this is kind of a really introduction to design intent, but there's one more thing that I want to think about, because all the design intent stuff I've been talking about at the moment has really been speaking to the layout of my sketches. And we talked about how if I change this, it basically maintains that center distance. And this is something that, again, you can change depending on what you're doing, and because I use the center and stuff like that. But you can also use design intent with how you think about your features as well. So I'm going to stick with the center here, and what I'll do is I'll create a sketch. I'll go back to this face, and then I will, again, draw my diagonal line like this. I'll make this construction and then put that as a center point. I'll press escape. I'll select the constraint here first, make this equal and equal, press escape to get out of the command. Then I'll go to my dimension tool and I'll make this 30, right? Okay, and then what I can do is, another thing which I can do sometimes is I'll just go ahead and lay down my sketches first. So I'll just go ahead. Now this is one situation because I got so much stuff going on. I'll go ahead and I'll actually just select the plane itself first, that one, and then I'll create a sketch off of that. And then you'll see that you can actually link sketches to each other, but for right now I'm just going to work right off the origin here, and then I'll make that construction, and then I'll go here, and then I will do equal, and then I will dimension this, and then I will say 10, and then I will make this a center point again. And again, this is just different ways of how we can lay stuff out. But specifically what I want to highlight in this example is that I have these two specific sketches. And again, there's a lot of different ways which you can arrange this stuff. But I'll go here, and then I'll go down here, and then I'll make this, well, I can actually probably still do the intersection, but I'll still keep it as two separate things like this. I'll keep it as 30. And then what I can do is, if I wanted to keep it as separate features, now normally I can pull it down to 30 here, but again, thinking about the design intent, if I went back to this feature and if I made it say I wanted this to be 50 tall, then my hole doesn't go all the way through. So one thing that we can do here is we can say edit feature, and then where it goes to extent type, I can say through all. So this is another way that we can speak to design intent in showing how we align and define our features and stuff like that. Also, another thing which we can do with this example is we can also think about where we want to place it, because right now my sketch is on this top face, and then another thing which I could do, and I'll draw them both on the, I'll do this as one sketch, is I will again draw my rectangle, put a line, I will make this line a construction, I will make this a midpoint constraint with the center here. I will draw another one, and I will do line, and then I will make this a construction line. I will put a equal length constraint on these two, and then I will put an equal length constraint on these two. I'll dimension them both, and then I'll make that 30, and then I'll make this 10. So it's pretty much the same thing before. I'll make these coincident again. Click that one. I'll click this here, make that midpoint. Now, one of the things that's also interesting, and this will really come into play when we talk about assemblies or multi-body parts or all the sort of things where we have different stuff working together. I'm going to do my extrude again. I'm going to select this one, but this time what I'll do is I will go to direction, and I'll say symmetric. So what this does is this will place my defining plane in the middle of my part, which will really help with origins when we start working with multi-body parts. We have the option of doing half length or full length. I'll do the whole length here, and I'll make it 30. And then just the visualization here is that this this plane is here in the middle, and I'll go ahead and change the visible to wireframe so we can get a better look at it, right? So we talked a little bit about references and how we define our references. So in this simple example, I just want to go ahead and show you some of the applications of that, and we'll go into it more a little bit later. All right, here we go. Thank you.